Time now for our weekly roundtable. In looking back over the past week, there was one subject in particular that grabbed our attention: the increasingly rocky relationship between the United States and China. In one short week, a series of issues came between the two countries: an American arms sale deal to Taiwan, a proposed White House visit with the Dalai Lama, and a disagreement over trade. To talk about all of this, we're joined by two world-focused regulars, David Andelman, editor of the World Policy Journal, and Ian Bremmer, the president of Eurasia Group. Gentlemen, welcome back to the roundtable. Good to see both of you again.
Good to see you.
So we've had these numerous, in fact, recent barbed, harsh exchanges. What's behind the administration's tougher stance towards China? And also, why is China being increasingly vocal in criticizing the United States on all of these issues all at once, David?
Well, it has been a process. There's no question about that. China and the United States are kind of jockeying, in a sense, although it's certainly not been positioned that way, is who's going to be the next great superpower. And you know, each one has its own agenda. Often they're conflicting agendas. In this case, in this week, they all happen to have a confluence, which I suspect is somewhat coincidental, that all came together at 1 week. But nevertheless, each one is a subject that each country respectively has important stands that differ dramatically from the other.
Do you see the ground shifting here? I mean, has there been a change, a shift in the administration's position towards China? There was a recent statement quoted in the press by one of a very high-ranking White House official saying that the United States is bent towards a new relationship with a rising China.
Interestingly, I don't think that there is a change yet in the administration's policy towards China, but I think one is coming. Where there have been a change, two changes. First of all, the Chinese behavior towards the United States, much more assertive on a whole bunch of things. It started off with the way they effectively just killed the Copenhagen Agreement, really by themselves, refused to allow, for example, any discussion of emission standards, even voluntary from any other states, and showed a lot of symbolic disdain diplomatically towards the United States that historically you never would have seen from China. We've seen a lot more assertiveness from China on things like currency, on trade, of course, in cybersecurity and Google, on Iran, on Taiwan, on the Dalai Lama. Taiwan and the Dalai Lama we knew about for months. So that's the first thing that we're seeing that's different. The second thing we're seeing that's different is the United States is going to politicize this relationship from the bottom up. And the fact is that you have 10% unemployment in this country. You have 10% growth in China. Those two things do not play well together, and so as a consequence, the Obama administration is going to be forced to take a tougher line simply because you're going to hear from Congress, you're going to hear it in the media, you're going to hear it from labor in the United States.
David, do you think that there is anything different today than there was, say, for example, a year ago or even 2 years ago in terms of the U.S.'s position towards China?
I think there's certainly a difference in the relationship between the two countries today as opposed to a year or 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you have to remember, China was buying tremendous quantities of, and now holds tremendous quantities of American debt. That's vital, of vital importance to understand. The other thing that's happening now, as Ian quite rightly says, is America is trying desperately to come out of the recession it's in right now. And some of that will be trade, inevitably. And what Obama said in the State of the Union address, which I thought was very interesting and not really well picked up, was this idea of doubling America's exports. Well, that's got to be, at least to a degree, probably a large degree, at the expense of China. China has got to be very sensitive to that. And I think that also plays into the entire equation.
Well, you were at Davos at the World Economic Forum recently. Was there any meeting of minds in terms of resolving the economic relationship and the strains within it, particularly in terms of making some progress towards the currency issue, trying to resolve that anytime soon?
No, the Chinese officials I spoke to were very clear. They said that a stable Chinese currency is good when the dollar's weak, it's good when the dollar is strong, and they're going to continue with that. There's no question that the largest Chinese delegation we've ever seen in Davos and a delegation from the United States that was just a few people were not going to have a lot of meeting time at Davos. It didn't happen. But I think what we do see from China, and David's very much right about this, they do not believe that the American model going forward is going to support them. for lots of reasons, and as a consequence, they know they have to get themselves away from an export-driven economy. They are completely consistent on this. They're going to move very, very fast. Right now, 37% of the Chinese economy, China's GDP, is consumption. Everyone I've spoken to believes that they want to move that to 50% within 5 years. That means that the United States becomes less indispensable for China.
So the Chinese internal market is of vital importance to them and will continue to grow, just as Ian's suggesting.
So if China revalued its currency, would it help the U.S. economy?
Well, I mean, anything would help, presumably, and I've heard reports that they could revalue by 5% or so this year. That will certainly help. It'll certainly be moving in the right direction, but that would not be the only motive for China to do that. They're not really driven right now by any sense of how this would play in the United States or with the United States. They're much more worried about their own domestic and international agenda, of which the United States is only one component.
You know, some in the West have called China's increasing assertiveness triumphalism. Do you think that's too strong a word? What do you think?
I think that's a strong word. I think that the Chinese do want to have a good relationship with the United States, actually. I think that they want to have a green economy. I think there are lots of things the Chinese would like to have, but it's not their top priority. Their top priority is growth and political stability that is sustainable within their system. And the fact is that those priorities are increasingly heading directly at speeding train U.S. national and economic security interests. These are becoming increasingly zero-sum. The Chinese economic model is one that is incompatible at many levels with the United States economic model. You just won't have access to free consumer markets, labor markets, capital markets the way multinational corporations have for the past decades. When the Chinese no longer need American dollars for foreign direct investment, all they want is technology, which Western corporations are increasingly loath to give them because it gets ripped off. The fundamental basis of this relationship is no longer there. And so when you have American officials saying we need a new relationship, they're coming to terms with that.
But at the same time, though, they want respect. The Chinese want respect, and above all, they want respect from the largest power in the world other than China. So that's what they're really trying to, they're almost begging for that at some time. And sometimes it gets a bit strident, but I think respect is what they're seeking.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.